everyone, my name is Brittany from Brittany Loves Reading, and this month I have been a co-host for Stars Hollowathon. Stars Hollowathon is a readathon hosted by Neva from Reading with Neva, and every week we get a new role and get to pick a new book for that prompt. When I think Gilmore Girls, I think of this town of Stars Hollow, so I'm so glad that Neva decided to name it Stars Hollowathon because I loved the feel of that small town. Stars Hollow is the place that I think everyone wishes they could live. I certainly do. And so today I'm going to be talking about 5 books set in small towns that I think you should check out. I think I dream of living in a quirky small town. I don't think I would ever actually live in one because I like living in a city where I can get everything really easily. But in my heart of hearts, I think I really would love to live in a small town because some of my favorite books are set with those small town vibes where everyone knows everybody. You have these amazing characters that have these little quirks and little things that they do that just make them so unique. And I just love it. The first book I'm going to talk about is Abby Jimenez's Part of Your World. I read this for Rom-Comathon just a couple of months ago in February and adored this book. It was my only 5-star from Rom-Comathon, and I need to read more of Abby Jimenez's works. This follows Alexis and Daniel. Alexis is on her way home from a funeral when she gets a flat tire outside of this tiny town and gets the help from Daniel to help fix her tire. She ends up having a one-night stand with Daniel and runs away when she finds out she is 10 years older than Daniel. However, she can't get him out of her head and keeps going back, and they form this relationship, but kind of know that there's no way that this could ever be anything permanent. Alexis is a surgeon who is a legacy surgeon from a very big family of famous surgeons and is helping run a foundation and has this really big life in this really big town. And Daniel runs a B&B and does woodworking in this really small town, and they don't see how that will ever mesh. Most of this book, however, is set in the small town because Alexis is the one that travels to see Daniel, and I loved this town. There's animals, there's a petting zoo with the best names, there's a local bar and the bar owner, and everyone knows everybody and everyone knows everybody's business. And really, the small town plays a big part in this book because, as the title says, part of your world, it's how will these two from these really different places in life meld into a relationship. My favorite part of this book was the communication in this book. Daniel and Alexis have excellent communication. This book does not rely on miscommunication as a trope. They talk everything out, and I really appreciated that in this book, and it was one of the reasons that I gave it 5 stars. The next book I want to talk about is actually really a series, and it is Stealing Home by Cheryl Woods, or the Sweet Magnolias series. I've only read the first book, but I'm going to be continuing it next month with a few people over here on Bookstagram, one of them being Dusty Bookstiffers and Nicole and Neva from Reading with Neva. And we are going to be reading this together. We actually even found the cookbook for this series, and I cannot wait because a big part of this book is the food. So, very excited about that. This is set in a small town called Serenity. If you maybe recognize this, you may have seen the Netflix show, which is based off the book series. I have watched the Netflix show, love the show, read the first book, love the first book, cannot wait to be continuing. This is set in the small town of Serenity, again, where everyone knows everybody. This has a bit more drama to it than necessarily being solely a romance. It follows 3 friends who are best friends growing up, and they call themselves the Sweet Magnolias. They have margarita night. One of them owns a restaurant. One of them is a lawyer. One of them is a stay-at-home mom who has just recently gone through a divorce and is now dating the new coach of the town's baseball team. These women decide to open a health spa together, and we watch their journey navigating new love, returning love, family, and all sorts of things together through these books. This town is so fantastic. because you have this mix of small town drama where you have people who've known each other since high school and maybe were like bullies in high school now trying to use other people's gossip as pull in other people's lives, as well as people who've seen these kids growing up and are now like part of the village that helps take care of their kids. The first book was a really great time, and like I said, I can't wait to continue it over the next few months with Nicole and Neva, as well as to try some of the recipes that are in the book, because Dana Sue can cook. And I think it's going to be really fun to kind of try a little taste of Serenity myself. I would be remiss if I do not mention the small town in the Love Light Farms series. Love Light Farms is, I guess, a holiday book, but it's holiday light. It's really only holiday themed because it's set at a Christmas tree farm, and it's mostly set around Thanksgiving. So yes, it does kind of run into the Christmassy time, but it's not super Christmas heavy, and the other books in the series are not Christmassy at all. So I want to preface that right from the get-go. I 5-starred the first book, only gave the second book 3 stars, and the reason being was the second book didn't have as much of that small town vibes that I loved from the first book. I'm hoping those small town vibes are back in the third. But the first book has so much of this small town vibes. This follows Stella and Luca. Stella owns a Christmas tree farm and has entered a contest with an Instagram influencer to win $100,000, but lies on the application saying that she runs this farm with her boyfriend. Luca is really her best friend, and they are very, very close. Like, to the point that I even questioned that there was no way they had not hooked up at some point, because they are very physically close. They cuddle a lot, they're very touchy-feely, and I questioned that at the beginning of the book because it seemed like there was no way they were this physically intimate and had never been actually intimate, but apparently the book assumes that that is the case. They decide to fake date for the purpose of this competition, but the town can't know that, and the town is very, very excited that finally Stella and Luca are together. This town is very excited. They had a betting pool of when these two would finally get together, and that comes out once they start fake dating. They also have a phone tree in the second book, which the sheriff has to actually like police the phone tree and what the phone tree can actually be used for, because basically it's just a gossip information line in this tiny town. I just loved every minute of this town. Okay, the next book I want to talk about is The Little Library on Cherry Tree Lane by Katie Ginger. This book I actually had an ARC from NetGalley a year or 2 ago from, and I love a book about books, and this book was so cute. This follows Elsie, who is the local librarian at a very small local library, and the library really is more of like a community center for this town. You have, you know, your seniors coming to do puzzles and do crosswords, single moms coming with their babies to have baby time, and you really see how this library is the center of this community, and it is a very small community. However, Jacob Yardley comes into town and is a developer and has decided to build affordable housing, which in theory is a great thing and will help expand the town. But they've bought the property that the library sits on, thinking the library is not essential and is going to knock it down. Elsie is not okay with this because it is the center of this community, and she's having none of this. So Elsie comes up with a plan to basically save the library. There's protesting, there is some trickery going on, and her and Jacob clash, obviously, are very much enemies that turn into something more. This isn't enemies to lovers. And if you like books about books, I would highly recommend this one. The last book that I want to talk about, and again, it is more a series than a book, and that is Still Life by Lucy Penny. This is the only book on this list that isn't a romance. It is a mystery series. It is almost a cozy mystery, but technically is not, because Armin Gamache is the head of homicide for the Surrey to Quebec and is technically a real detective. So can't really be considered a cozy, but it is definitely leans in the feel of a cozy mystery. This is set in the town of Three Pines, and most of the books in the series are set in the town of Three Pines, which is a very, very teeny tiny town just outside of Quebec. Armand Gamache comes to this town to solve his first mystery and finds this fantastic town that has now been marked with a murder and somehow continues to be marked with murder, which is somewhat suspicious since there's only a couple of people who live here, but that's fine. This town is full of some of the best characters that I have seen in books in a very long time. You have married artist couple who are very eccentric. You have Ruth, who is a poet but is cranky and is also the head of the volunteer fire department. You have Gabri and his husband who run the bakery and coffee shop, as well as the inn, and everything in the bakery and coffee shop is for sale as part of an antique shop. And that is kind of like the hub of where everything happens. There are just so many fun characters in this little tiny town. Those are the 5 characters that kind of are in every book that I've read, but there are also side characters that kind of pop in to each book that are also people who live in this town of Three Pines, and I just love it. I also love that this is set in Canada, and it really does lean into being set in Canada. There's talks of Tim Hortons and double doubles and different types of Canadian treats, and I just think that's a fun time because I don't see that in books very often, and I enjoy seeing a little bit of home in the series. Anyway, those are the 5 books that I think you should read if you want a small town vibes. If you have any recommendations for books set in small towns, please let me know, because maybe I haven't heard of them yet and I would love to read them. As well as people who are watching this video can check the comments and see your recommendations as well. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.